to our QuaranSTREAM Answers for COVID-19. As always, I'm one of your members at large on the Fairfax County School Board. I'm Abrar Omeish, and I'm joined with...
And I'm Kimberly Boateng, the student rep to the school board.
Great. So we will be joined with two guests shortly, and they'll be giving us some updates. In the meantime, as always, if you want to join the QuaranSTREAM, we do these every Thursday and Sunday at 7 p.m. If you want to get reminders, you can text to the number 81010, the @ QUARANSTR, that's for Quaran, and then STR, and you'll get text reminders before each session. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, May, so be sure you're taking care of yourself and finding the tools that you need to stay healthy and happy. We so far have 7,401 cases in Fairfax County, with over 1,000 being hospitalized and nearly 300, so about 286 new cases just today, 274 total deceased. That means we still are going up that exponential curve. We need to be careful and take the proper measures. You may have heard that the governor had put out a plan to phase out and everything, but this week he also decided that Fairfax County is not one of those areas that it's safe to do that yet, and all of Northern Virginia really. So be sure to stay home where you can and continue to take precautions. So we have two elections coming up locally. May 19th, really soon, is the Vienna and Clifton Town Council elections. Be sure to have your voice be heard. The deadline to request a ballot has already passed, so hopefully you already got yours, but you're able to select option 2A for the absentee or early voting option, which is just, it indicates illness, but it applies to everyone this time around. As for the next election, June 23rd is going to be for Senate and Congress primaries, Democrats and Republicans. And there are some contested races, so be sure to get your ballot. May 26th is the deadline to register or update your voter registration, and then there will be a later date for requesting your ballot as your deadline, but you can request it now. I will also go over a number of school board meetings that happened this week. I'll cover the Thursday one in more depth after we go over the FCPS overview. But for now, Monday, we had a meeting where we postponed the advanced academic placement presentation. As you might know, basically the school system, we were concerned about equity and access to some of our advanced programs. So the previous school board asked an external consultant to take a look to have an objective view as to where improvements can be made. Since then, they have come back with their report, which is about 69 pages. It's posted on Board Docs, which is the library where the board, as you know now, keeps all of its documents. You could go fcps.edu, click the main menu tab, school board, and you'll find a link to Board Docs. And you can check the notes from the Monday meeting to find the report attached. That has been postponed though, and the presentation will be happening soon. The continuity of learning plan was also presented. We're going to leave that as a teaser for now. We talked about graduation, summer school, what decisions were made for that, and I'll present those to you at the end of our FCPS updates. We also, Tuesday, we had a budget public hearing. So we heard from a number of folks, really insightful comments, a lot of emphasis on school-based staffing, and certainly tried to apply that today during our budget work session, where we parsed through a number of items that the superintendent's advising us to adopt. And I will share a more detailed list when we finish the updates. So, and then of course, Wednesday was the governance committee and the Minority Student Achievement Oversight Committee both met. And those recordings are also available on Board Docs. So with that, Kimberly will give us some updates on food and technology in FCPS.
So for food, as of yesterday, May 13th, FCPS has distributed 870,441 meals. So meal distribution will take place as normal on Memorial Day, Monday 25th. So if that's something that you're still continuing to use, you'll still be available for your use. And also Saratoga may be getting a stop. And I just wanted to say that's So my counselor, she actually reached out to me because I go to Lee High School and Saratoga is a part of that region. And she reached out and she expressed concern because how far some of the stops were or grab and goes were from like the community. So I reached out and Abrar was able to talk to somebody, and also so we're trying, so because my counselor reached out, Saratoga is now being probably getting a stop. So things like that, if you reach out and we can try to see if we can make things happen. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for like the advocacy of my counselor and also just the families that live in that area.
Yeah, your voice can matter. And if there's anything you need out there, be sure to let us know. Also, shout out to our CFO, Lee Burden, who was on it and made it happen in a single day. So
So in terms of technology, as of the 12th, there's been 17,778 laptops distributed and 1,405 MiFi devices.
And how's it going for school, Kimberly? Is everything smooth now?
I mean, for the most part, yeah. Yeah, we're all trying to look, just kind of like winding down, getting things done, trying to see like, because for all of us, the end of the school year is like kind of in sight. So we're just trying to, get as much content in as possible before the end and just trying to finish off the curriculum.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. And that's our expectation, folks. Blackboard and Google are up and running as normal now. If you have any questions or concerns, certainly be sure to reach out to your school-based technology specialist or let us know if you need to elevate anything, but definitely contact your principal as well. And if you need a MiFi device, a laptop, anything like that, and haven't obtained it or know of someone who hasn't, be sure to let us know. There was actually a rumor that was mentioned in the MSAOC meeting this week that came to my attention that some families are being told that elementary school students do not have access to MiFi devices. I just want folks to know in the community that that's not necessarily the central office position. So if you know of an elementary school student, if you have an elementary school student who needs that access, they are in fact able to obtain it. They'd have to contact the principal, and if there's an issue there, be sure to reach out to either top admin if you know how to do that, or reach out to your school board and we can look into that for you. All right, so academics. So far there have been, today there were 25,713 synchronous sessions launched with 205,890 students attending those sessions. So it's been, as we said, going smoothly, and hopefully that's the case for everyone. The Northern Virginia Community College Jumpstart program, which we mentioned last time, which was college readiness and thinking ahead for seniors, offers an opportunity for them to get a 2 tuition-free college course credit. So be sure to look out for that if you're interested. Applications are due tomorrow. So make sure you sign up or fill out the proper paperwork on NOVA's website if that's of interest to you. So go ahead, Kimberly, let's get an update on special ed.
Okay, so for special ed, FCPS released a new special education document on May 11th with information about executive functioning strategies, early childhood special education, behavior intervention services, and other services outlined. So to find that, you got to go to the main webpage, daily updates for May 11th, and in that link, there should be the special education newsletter. So the Student Safety and Wellness Office is offering virtual alcohol and other drug prevention supports. So the links to these resources are on the Student Safety Wellness and off the website for FCPS. And if you need support, reach out to your school's substance abuse and prevention specialist.
Great. So before I go into updates on seniors, I'm going to keep that until the end, but I'm going to have Kimberly give us a list of some of the resources that are out there available for you and your family, and then we'll go over our board meeting.
Okay. So FCPS families whose children are eligible for a federal free reduced price meal programs can receive temporary food assistance from the Virginia Department of Social Services. So families will receive PEBT, the Pandemic Electronic Bank Transfer, for temporary food assistance to cover the cost of meals missed while schools are closed. FCPS has submitted the names of families available to the Virginia Department of, of Social Services, families that are not currently eligible from free reduced price meals can still apply for the program by June 11th. For more information, you can visit Virginia PEBT website. So for tips for online learning and success, this includes tips and troubleshooting guides to ensure success in learning. Do you want me to, Abrar, should I screen share this one?
It's up to you.
Okay.
No, maybe not this one, but.
All right. So to find it, you can search up online learning for students FCPS, and you can also search up how is FCPS doing distance learning, and they should bring up these resources to for tips and like guides to ensure that you're getting the most out of online learning. And so Virginia, the education and you're going to help me out. I haven't taken Spanish since last year.
All right. Are you okay. Educación en radio. Go for it.
No, you're going to have to say it again. This word always got me.
Educación en radio.
Educación en radio. The Commonwealth's first bilingual radio learning program. The program will feature pre-recorded lessons in multiple subject areas to support continuity of learning for Spanish-speaking students in grades K through 12. The program will air Monday through Friday from 10:30 to 11 a.m.
Good stuff. And there will be a collaboration on our end too. We are working with CASA, as well as a couple of our staff members, a parent liaison, who's an incredible resource in our community, to help us provide some Spanish resource as well. So you may see some Spanish on your next QuaranSTREAM. We'll see. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. All right. So, I mean, it is a resource really to think of our community holistically, right? There are a lot of people who are not able to access information in the same way that many of you are. You can pop in here, you can ask a question, you get a live answer. But a lot of folks don't have the same opportunity to get that information. So I see we have one of our guests joining us here. We're gonna go over some updates in a few minutes. Delegate Ibraheem Samirah, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kimberly. Hi, Abrar. How are you guys?
Good to see you. So I'm just going to go over a couple things from our board meeting, and we'll go right into a discussion about all the things that we want to hear from you. So yeah, last update for you guys. So I know I've kept you throughout the update session here, hanging and not sharing certain things about graduation and seniors. So essentially the situation right now is the board on Monday voted that we will be honoring our graduates in a number of ways. This came out of a robust community feedback collection process that our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Frances Ivy, underwent. She spoke with student leadership through the Superintendent's Advisory Council. She spoke with the Principals Association, teachers, families. They put out a survey. So they really tried to comprehensively look at everyone's perspective to come up with how we can best honor our seniors during this time. So we currently are planning to have a day where seniors can come in with proper social distancing, one-on-one, with their caps and gowns to take senior graduation pictures. And that will be beginning in June. Each graduate will have their appropriate cords and medals, and seniors will be able to receive their diplomas at this photo event. A limited number of family members will be permitted to join, and all those instructions, of course, will be sent to you through your school or through the school system to your inbox. There will also be a class of 2020 celebration video that's going to be made. Seniors are going to be contacted this month to submit different clips and information, photos, things they want to include in the video. And it will be professionally produced, and the budget will be behind it to distribute it at no cost to members of the class of 2020 to honor all of you for your hard work this past 4 years. And finally, the important piece here too is the board did vote not to eliminate the possibility of an in-person graduation. So we don't know what the situation is going to look like moving forward, but all possibilities are available to us, and we don't want to cancel something that may be possible, albeit perhaps improbable. And a decision about the fall ceremony will be announced around Labor Day. So that was what the board voted on regarding graduation. Summer school, the board voted that we are going to be doing summer school and it's going to be virtual, which means we need to provide additional technological support in advance of that. There is going to be some special ed developmental support throughout the summer. In addition, of course, to various course offerings, the board was discussing today and is very likely to approve a big budget item to support the online campus to further enhance your ability to access learning throughout the summer. And I am proposing an amendment to add supports for English language learners throughout the summer as well, because K through 8 right now do not have any supports. So I will share real quick my screen just to show you where you can find the list of things that we considered today. So essentially, after all of the, let me see here. Okay, there we go. So you can see here, after a number of cuts and, well, not cuts, but reductions from what we were expecting in revenue from the county, we've had to kind of hone in on what our priorities are. The superintendent's presented his proposals, and this is the feedback from the school board about his suggestions. So the board generally is in agreement on these green items and not necessarily feeling so strongly about the red ones, not necessarily to mean that they're the white ones, sorry. So the green ones are, the board is supporting. The white ones are to be postponed for a time when we can examine more pay or more funding. So for example, at the end of June, when it's considered year-end budgeting, when we look at any surplus, any remaining funds from the year to see if we can allocate it to these things. So they're a little bit less priority. And then the red is things that the superintendent actually withdrew from the conversation himself. So we didn't have to worry about it, and he took our feedback on those. So happy to answer questions in the Q&A. I don't want to keep our guests waiting too long, but and we'll be happy to go over these later if folks are interested. Finally, the distance learning return to school plan for the fall is posted as well on board docs. It was discussed on Monday, and the plan so far is to probably be going virtual as to the science that we know in Fairfax County, but all options are still on the table, and we're certainly going to want to plan for both. And the school board is committed to purchasing technology to support all of our students, because you might recall the school board made a purchase for middle school laptops several months ago when the crisis started. And we still have to purchase elementary school supplies. There are enough in most of our schools to fund most of it or to provide most of it, but there's still a portion that we would need to purchase. And certainly everyone is purchasing laptops, so we do need to make that decision quickly. And it will be happening in the coming weeks. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that come up later. For now, I want to bring back Delegate Samirah, and we also have Delegate Marcus Simon, who's going to be joining us around 7:30 to chat with us. So Ibraheem, welcome back from session. I know it's been a couple weeks now, maybe 2 weeks or so.
Oh my God, it's
3?
been longer than that.
Longer than that? All right, the time, we no longer have a sense of time in, this social isolation. But give us a sense of, how things have been, what you've been most excited about from session, what your feel is with everything that's been going on.
Gosh, well, we had quite a session where we caught up on so much legislation that I think 20 years of democracy in Virginia had to catch up on, because the political will wasn't there to pass it. The dynamic has changed in the Commonwealth significantly enough to the point where we can pass these kind of bills that relate to the diversity of economic backgrounds, but also social backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds in Virginia, and to respect them all across the board and to protect them as if they are the majority. And that's what happened. We treated our most marginalized communities as if their well-being, their success relates to all of us in Virginia. We passed bills on criminal justice reform. We passed bills on labor rights. We passed bills on healthcare reform. We passed bills that relate to almost every major part of life: housing, transportation, everything that relates to Virginians, and we did it in a way that gets us caught up with the times. That doesn't mean that there's not much work left to do. There's a lot of work left to do. And next year is going to be a year where we cover a lot of new areas of legislation that weren't covered this year because of us needing to catch up. We did extensive work on gun control. We did extensive work on reproductive rights. We did extensive work on protecting our voting rights. And next year, we're going to probably focus more on building on our successes in healthcare, to focus more on how we can control the pandemic and its effects, not only on healthcare, but also beyond, on the public health sphere overall, and also talk about housing as well, because cost of housing is going to undoubtedly increase in the coming year because of the nature of our economy, our housing market predictably going to be crashing in the coming year. And as such, we're going to have to put into place a lot of protections for Virginians.
Yeah, actually, just following up on one point you made, Kimberly, I know you'll have some questions for him as well. You mentioned housing, and I know that one of the things you'd been advocating for is allowing folks, multiple families to potentially live in similar housing units, which is not allowed for certain regulations and zoning rules and all of that. So have we seen any progress on that? Has COVID changed anything with that?
It's an interesting topic to talk about in relation to COVID because, the areas hit the hardest by COVID-19 are areas that have more people living in them than other areas, relatively speaking. That does not mean that having more people live in a single area is the problem. The problem is, at the end of the day, not having enough protective equipment, PPE. The problem is not having enough medical facilities prepared for the effects of COVID-19. The problem isn't people, it's the way we treat our healthcare system as a system that we profit off of, rather than a system that's supposed to protect people's livelihoods as its number one goal. So to jump back to the question, housing is going to continue to be a problem on a public health level. If you don't have a good place to live, you really can't take care of yourself. You can't self-quarantine in this specific situation that we're in right now. You're more worried about having to pay the bill for rent rather than taking care of yourself. Having an inaccessible, good housing for an affordable cost causes so many problems that go beyond the housing situation itself. We were just talking about healthcare, but it also goes into how much time you spend on the road. Which also is a cause of stress. It's also a cause of social disconnect. It's a cause of family disconnect. People spending 2.5 hours on the road just to get to work and back are facing a lot of problems in their life as such. And we need to do our best to allow people to not have to go through those stresses simply by allowing them to live in the areas that they want to live in. And that's the basic premise of the bills I put together this year that made national headlines. I was very proud of them. They were considered controversial by some groups of people. I will say that there's a lot of misconceptions regarding the concept of placing more people in a singular area. And a lot of it is racial. There are a lot of racist tendencies that still exist that are playing out in the form of indirect laws and rules, regulations that get put in place. A modern day form of redlining, if you were to call it that way. When one area is only accepting single family homes, that means people that can afford single family homes are the ones that can only live there. That means by virtue, people that don't have the money to live in single family homes cannot live there. And those people happen to come from more diverse backgrounds, non-white backgrounds than their counterparts that live in single family zoned areas. And we know that today, your zip code affects your ability to live a good life, your ability to get a good education, your ability to get a good job. It affects so many things. And zip codes are the way that we had redlining before too, in the eras of the civil rights movement and prior. And so we need to be able to look at the zip code, that unit, and judge for ourselves whether or not there is equity, and that everybody across the economic spectrum, but also across the racial and ethnic spectrum, are able to live in those zip codes.
Yeah, thank you. Kimberly, you want to go for it?
Yeah, so you were actually kind of touched on a lot of what, like, your passions and what you're focusing on in the house. So I just wanted to ask, what are you personally personally, what have you worked on in response to this, and like what do you think that the state could be doing more of in response to coronavirus?
So much. I called for a special session. I got booed. That was during the last day of session.
Hold on, a special session for what? COVID?
To talk about COVID-19 and its effects that's going to happen across the Commonwealth.
You got booed?
Yes, I did, because it was the last day of session and my colleagues
People wanted to go home.
And it didn't seem like a big deal at the time, because it was maybe the first day we was treated like a pandemic in the United States. I was watching it all along grow in Asia and it spread across Europe and then come to the US, and was waiting for that moment when we were going to call it a pandemic to be able to come out with full force. But it was not easy to talk about in the beginning in Virginia, because a lot of people were ignorant to the fact that COVID-19 is going to have such a tremendous impact on people's lives. So there was so much problems that happened as a result of our inability to legislate during this time. And we had that opportunity. So that was my first go. The biggest thing that I was pushing for was to pass legislation, zero cost legislation on the state, to ensure as many Virginians as we could, given the regulations that exist in the healthcare system. Universal healthcare is one way of putting it. But unfortunately, at the state level, because of federal regulations, we can't really pursue a true version of universal health care, as in every person has health insurance. The best thing that we could get close to is to expand our current programs that we have in place. Two main programs are, for those that are in need, financially in need, are Medicaid. And there was an expansion of Medicaid a couple years ago. We could expand it one more time so that it can cover people up to 200% of the federal poverty line, versus what it covers right now is 138% of the federal poverty line. 200% of the federal poverty line is an income of about $20,000 a year. So people that make $20,000 or less should have guaranteed health care. That was the premise of that push. Another push was to cover the subsidies that are in place under the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare marketplaces, which right now are in open enrollment. I think tomorrow is the last day of open enrollment, actually, where if you make up to 500% of the federal poverty line, you should be able to qualify for those subsidies. Currently, it's up to 400% of the federal poverty line. And that causes us to miss about 11% of Virginians in the middle of the economic ladder. And then also allowing there to be a state health-based exchange that got passed this year, but to put regulations on it so that we can cover the most vulnerable of our constituents here in Virginia, specifically to cover mothers that are soon to be pregnant, to allow open enrollment. I had a bill there to allow open enrollment for women for individuals that are pregnant across the board, whenever they so decide to join into the marketplace, to be able to buy in whenever they want to, so that they're not restricted to that specific category of time that is open enrollment season. I see Delegate Marcus Simon is with us now.
Yeah. Hi, Marcus. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Sorry I'm late, guys. Just jumping in
No
here.
worries. I know you are, amongst different conflicts, and posting your 3D photos here and there.
Absolutely.
Background.
I saw the 3 limes most recently, so.
That's right. How round they were.
Right, yeah. It's the small things nowadays, but no, really appreciate you joining us. I'm here with Kimberly, who's the student rep on our school board.
Oh, very good.
So yeah, Marcus is one of the delegates in my area. So, Anyway, but Ibraheem was just giving us a bit of an overview from his perspective as to how session went, what some of the priorities have been, what his thoughts have been. Maybe, Marcus, just talk to us a little bit about what that was like, what you see to have been the priorities, things you're proud of that came out. I'm proud of a number of things you guys did, by the way, and a number of them are impacting our schools. But yeah, I'll give you the floor and we'll, ask some questions here and there.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, feel free to interrupt. And if I go somewhere that you guys have already been, by all means, give me a wave or something and I'll say I'll stop. But it was a really interesting session. It was I spent a lot of time working on some of the mechanics of the transition. I'm the House Democratic parliamentarian, so I'm our rules guy. And so I got involved very early with Speaker Fillercorn in drafting new rules for the Democratic majority and going through figuring out how we would do things, what we're going to name our committees. I mean, some of the things that had taking over as Democrats and just some of the things that we did, I know they seem small and insignificant, but it was sending a signal about what our priorities are. So for instance, one of the most powerful committees in the House side, at least, had been called the Commerce and Labor Committee. And we said, no, it's the Labor and Commerce Committee, right? We're gonna put labor first because that's who elected us, right? That's who brought us to office. That's who came out and knocked doors in our districts and gave us the support and the manpower and woman power, but the people power to get through our elections. And so there were some little things like that we did. And then I was on a Zoom call earlier today with some folks working on gun violence prevention. But one of the other first things we did in the rules was we gave ourselves the ability or the authority to ban guns from the Capitol complex itself. So from our House chamber, the Senate, and our buildings. And some people said maybe that was a little overkill, that we really need to do it. We never had a problem before. Then on January 20th, all these folks showed up. And if you guys have been watching the news lately in Michigan, seeing these armed militiamen coming and taking over, well, we had a scene just like that in Virginia, but we were able to keep them on the perimeter, right, and on the outside because we had passed new rules regarding open carrying of firearms. So some of the early things, again, they seemed insignificant and they seemed like they were more signaling than substance, but the signals are important too, and that's what leads, ultimately, I think, to the substantive successes that we started to have too. I went from being on committees that never met and on small committees with no subcommittees to suddenly being on privileges and elections, where I'm a vice chair, courts of justice on the civil subcommittee, housing, the general laws housing subcommittee, and on the rules committee, and then the joint rules committee. So I've got more, it's one of these be careful what you ask for types of situations. And so it was a very busy session for me. And I'll talk just briefly here about voting rights. HB1 was HB1 for a reason. We picked, our first 4 bills to introduce. HB1 was no excuse absentee voting, right? Which we don't want to quite call it that yet, but early voting in Virginia. Let's let folks vote when they're ready, and let's extend that voting period, and don't have to kind of make up some sort of excuse or reason why it is that you want to vote early. You want to vote early because that's when it's convenient for you. That's when it's easier. That's all you need to make up a reason, and that's because we want to encourage voting. And so we passed a number of bills along that same theme, right? HB1 sort of set the theme, but we did things to allow same-day voter registration starting next year. We've got automatic voter registration. So you go to the DMV, you don't opt in to register to vote now. Anytime you apply for a driver's license, you're going to be registered to vote unless you say, don't register me, I don't want to for some reason. So we've made Election Day a holiday in Virginia, a state holiday. Oh, by the way, we got rid of Lee Jackson Day.
Yeah, saw that.
Abrar, from your having been at Jeb Stuart High School Pyramid, which is now Justice High School. I mean, we're continuing some of that work. Fairfax has always led the way on a lot of those issues. We're continuing some of that work.
And Lee's coming too, Marcus. Actually, Kimberly is a student at Lee, and it will soon be something else. We have yet to determine. So
good for you, Kimberly. And so voting rights has been important. It's funny, Republicans get mad at me for saying it out loud, but I don't think we have anything to be ashamed of. When Republicans take over state legislatures, the first thing they do is they implement voter ID laws. They implement voter purge and registration purge rules. They do things to make it harder for people to vote and to disenfranchise people because they know that's their best chance of winning. Democrats can do the opposite in both ways. And yes, it makes it easier for Democrats to win elections. And it's also the right thing to do, right? It encourages more people to vote. So it has the advantage of being politically smart, but also being, I think, just frankly, the right thing to do. When more people vote, we tend to do better, but also we get a better result from the election when more people feel like they've had a voice, an opportunity to participate, an opportunity to have themselves be heard. So, that was a very important piece, I think, of what we did when we took over the legislature. There's more to do on that, and we'll continue those efforts. Couldn't do everything we wanted to in 1 year. The other thing that we did that I think is particular to the school board and to folks in education, I'm not on the education committee, but I got to visit it a few times. One of the bills I carried was HB 145, I think is the number, but it's a bill to have the State Board of Education provide a model policy regarding the treatment of transgender students all over the state. Frankly, what Fairfax is already doing in the policy that we've adopted in the past is probably better than what the state will come up with, but what the state will come up with will be a floor, and every locality in Virginia will have to meet at least our minimum standards and can go beyond that. And that prevents folks like this teacher in West Point, Virginia, from deliberately misgendering a 14-year-old student and causing them pain and harm that we know, scientifically is a harmful situation. And it gives local school boards the tool that they need to. I mean, I think some of these local school boards in some more rural jurisdictions, they want to do the right thing, but they'd like to have us tell them, you have to do it this way.
Hey, I mean, the political backlash from some of these parents, touching their children is something else. But yeah, I was going to actually ask, was it something that required jurisdictions to have a policy, or did you guys set the policy?
So it's a model policy. Then all the jurisdictions were required to adopt something that's either identical or better than whatever the state board comes up with. So in Virginia, we can't set, local jurisdictions have, constitutionally have the responsibility and the authority to set their policies, but we can set standards and then they have to adopt the policy. So it's sort of frankly, it's good. I think in Fairfax, we like in some ways having the authority to set our own standards because we want to be able to go beyond what somebody might be willing to do in a Chesterfield or a Wise or some other places. But when it comes to basic human rights and treatment of students, I think it's appropriate that we have the state board setting a minimum standard for folks. And so that's one of the education things that I was able to do this year that I was excited about. And it was not a straight party line vote. At the end of the day, when those folks were in control and when their leadership was telling them how to vote, they'd hold the line on some of these issues. But we got over 60 votes, I think 62 votes for this bill. So there are a number of Republicans that I think, have been wanting to do the right thing, and they just needed the right leadership in Richmond to be able to do it.
So what about all these unfunded mandates y'all sent our way? I'm partially teasing, but we were talking about this on the school board. Great policies, but not sure how we're going to implement them.
Well, it's always, and that's always the tough part, right? So we have these minimum standards that we want everybody to meet, and we want to set the right agenda. And it turns out in Fairfax and Falls Church City, which I also represent, you guys, end up sending much more down to Richmond than you end up getting back, just because of the way the funding formula works. And to some extent, that's appropriate. I understand from a Fairfax school board perspective, it seems very unfair, but it's on a larger scale. I think it's the same thing that you guys are talking about with One Fairfax, right? We want to make sure that every part of Fairfax, every school and every student, regardless of their zip code, gets the same level of treatment. Well, sometimes when we do things in Virginia, that means that Fairfax and Falls Church are going to have to contribute more than they may get back on some things. And like I said, I think in some cases that's appropriate. But with that, if we're going to make you pay for it, we need to give you some flexibility, I think, too. And then the other part of it, frankly, is that one of the really unfortunate impacts of COVID, there's the human costs, but there's also the budget impacts. And we had planned to give more money. Again, it wouldn't have turned into a actual teacher raise in Fairfax, but more money for teacher pay would have been more money in your budget. We try to push things whenever we can. We try to push things on a per capita basis. More things that we can fund per capita, the better off, obviously, Fairfax, the most populous jurisdiction in Virginia, will do, versus things that end up getting pushed through that composite index formula, where we end up really getting, maybe 70 cents on the dollar, or 30 cents on the dollar, excuse me, the other way around, back. And then also trying to tie things to the extent we can to at-risk students and to free and reduced price lunch populations. If we can fund those things directly, that'll help. So, but again, all that being said, a lot of the increases that we put into the budget are on hold. They were unallocated, is what we called it, at our reconvene session, waiting to figure out what the actual revenue forecasts turn out to be. And our revenue is kind of like, our revenue is the inverse of the curve that everybody's seen, the infection curve, which goes straight up like that. Our revenue is going just like that right now. And so part of the reason we didn't want to reforecast the budget right now is because if you follow that line straight down, right, and in theory, we have no money by September 1st. We're completely, and we don't think that's going to happen. It's going to balance out, and the trend will even out a little bit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the drawing board in early August probably and say, hey, where is the actual revenue? What does the actual revenue forecast look like, so we can preserve as much of that money for education as possible? But we're going to have, Ibraheem and I are going to have some very tough decisions to make when we get down to Richmond, particularly this particular fiscal year, because it's a little late in the game to look at new revenues. Come next year, I think we're going to have to look at and have some really hard decisions and hard conversations about taxes. We've done it a little bit for transportation, but we need to do it for in other areas of the budget as well.
I think most people don't know, Marcus, about the budget having to be constitutionally balanced, meaning that we can't move forward without it being balanced at all, or else we'll just be going in circles around each other. And so that puts a lot of pressure on us to think about how we're going to spend our money exactly. There are all sorts of cuts that happen to social services because of this kind of a constitutional requirement. Maybe one day we change our constitution to not have it to be forced to be balanced. I think the effects on all the states around the country from COVID-19 right now on their budgets is evident, but even more so strictly on us in Virginia than any other state in the country to use our money wisely. It has its perks, obviously. That means we're not, raising taxes, or we're not having to force people into doing certain things differently. But it also has the downside of cutting out social programs that we really care about and we really want to keep. I think Marcus and I can agree that we have a AAA bond rating. We should be able to use it, but it's not as easy as said and done. Hopefully one day we'll be able to come back to the things that we passed this year that we want to fund. Great programs like the G3 program that the governor introduced to try to push so that we can have our community colleges beyond our K through 12 schools to have a technical education that is supplemented with state dollars, and the people that study them also are taken care of in their life. We couldn't fund that because of the coronavirus pandemic having its impacts unknown on the budget so far. So yeah, we're gonna go back to the drawing board in August. I guess we didn't talk much about climate change action, and I know that's very important to our populations across the board, but even more so for our younger populations. We did pass a big bill this year called the Clean Energy Economy Act. I hope I didn't mess it up. That is what it is. Virginia Clean Economy Act, excuse me.
VCEA, right.
Yes, HB 1526. I had some serious concerns with it alongside a lot of other folks in the legislature. We passed it anyways because we needed to do something big this year. We know we're going to come back to the drawing board and try to strengthen the bill. in the coming years. It sets us on the pathway to 2050, or I should say 2045, to have carbon neutrality, as in essence, no carbon emissions that are harmful to our environment as of that date. We're going to have to push on the standards a little bit harder and make them a little better. Up until now, fossil fuel is still a very profitable industry, even for our state agency, essentially our state agency, Dominion Energy, excuse me. We need to make it less profitable for them and more profitable for them to pursue clean energy, so that
Right.
we have the grids and the infrastructure and the energy capacity to move us in the direction of saving our planet.
Yeah, and I guess one of the unfortunate things, even on the school level, is having to see cuts to some, or not being able to prioritize things everyone was excited about before. I imagine the environment is maybe one of those too, though we continue to think about it and want to certainly have it be a part of everything that we do. I know Kimberly has an audience question for us, so please.
Yes. So this is a question from Emily Vanderhoff, and she says, do you happen to know why school counselor funding was the only thing that was cut completely from the budget and not allocated?
And let me tell you, Emily is one of our very active Fairfax County Federation of Teachers members. She's always, advocating and coming out to the school board to make sure that we're taking care of our staff.
I don't know what exactly the governor's thinking was about that. I remember I talked to Skylar Van Valkenburg. That was one of the recommendations of the, in addition to being an important thing to do, is also one of the recommendations, I think, of the School Safety Commission, that we increase the number of counselors and we have a better ratio. We're trying to get down to 200 to 1. And why that was cut completely versus being unallocated, I'll try and find out and get back to you guys and let you know. I don't remember there, frankly, being, the list of things that was being done was so long. I don't remember a lot of discussion about that particular issue. I do remember, though, again, speaking with Skylar and some of the other members on the education committee that were unhappy about that particular change. And the other thing, just one more thing on the budget, as long as we're talking about that, to add to what Ibraheem was saying, Virginia is getting hurt at the worst possible time because of our budget cycle. Right. So a lot of states like Virginia have a biennial budget. We adopt it for a 2-year cycle. But most states are on a even year cycle. And so right now, Virginia is at the end of a fiscal year. And we also do a July fiscal year, right? So July 1st, 2020 is the end of our fiscal period, our 2-year fiscal year. And all the money is just disappearing, right? As I was saying, like that curve. And so we're getting hit at the worst possible time. We can't move money around within it and hope that it comes back before the end of the year so that we can be in balance. For us to be in balance, we're stuck redoing our budget at the worst possible time. So that contributes, again, to having to make hard decisions about things like school counselors.
And maybe it would be helpful even to just give a sense of, who has what powers, right? So you guys, Marcus, look at certain budget items, but the governor also has certain pots of money that you guys can't really influence much. Other than lobbying in your own capacities.
Well, and the other problem we've got with the budget, and the reason that's a good point. One of the things, a little civics education here in Virginia, because it's different than the federal level, is the governor on the budget has a line item veto authority, right? So what we did at reconvene session, we don't just vote to either override his vetoes or not. He has the ability to send down amendments to bills. The governor of Virginia can amend bills, and we have to vote on his amendments. And with most amendments, if you vote down the amendment, the governor actually, a lot of people don't realize, if we vote down the amendment, the governor can then veto the bill. We don't get another chance to override it. With the budget, even if we had voted against the cut at the reconvene session for school counselors, once the budget goes back to the governor's desk, he has a chance to do line item vetoes. And it's oddly enough, we don't get a chance to reverse that process. So, there's a lot of executive authority over the budget. Now, one of the nice things is we're coming back for a special session on the budget. The governor could have made a lot of these cuts himself completely without input from the legislature, but because we're of the same party, and because, frankly, these are going to be some difficult decisions that need to be made, I think he wants to have the legislature involved in the process. So we may have an opportunity to revisit the issue of the counselors during a special session this summer.
Yeah, and Emily, thank you for all you're doing. And there really is no easy answer. We were in a reconvene session in the middle of a pandemic, all sorts of technical problems with voting, and we're having to read the budget cuts all across the board and try to make a decision without having to sacrifice other parts of the budget. And unfortunately, we had to go along with the governor with the promise that we'd come back for a special session to discuss all the things that were cut and to work on the budget as Delegate Simon was just mentioning.
So what are the conversation amongst you guys now? I mean, obviously you're out of session, but as fellow party members or as fellow delegates, are you guys planning? Are you kind of convening to even just brainstorm where you guys want to take things and see where the events, how events are unfolding?
So we have fairly regular conference calls. And then depending on what's going on, they can be weekly. Sometimes they're more frequent. Before the reconvene session, we had Zoom calls like this with the caucus. I think we had them 4 nights in a row for 2.5, 3 hours at a time. Ibraheem shaking his head. Like, I mean, so I will say this about Speaker Fillercorn in particular. She is a very inclusive style of leadership, and she wants to hear from all of us, and she wants to give a lot of a lot of folks would in the way it often used to be is like, look, these are your marching orders, either you're with us or you're not, and if you're not, just be prepared to pay the consequences for that. And she doesn't like to do things quite that way. I mean, she'll come down, I mean, don't get me wrong, don't be confused, she's not soft either, right? I mean, when she needs you, she's going to come talk to you and she's going to have the conversations, but and she'll get you where she needs you to be if she really needs to, but the process is very inclusive. So it's not, I don't mean it's just any kind of weakness at all, because it's certainly not. But there is a lot of conversations that we have as a group. We try and make sure she wants to have a sense of the caucus. She leads us, but she wants to know what direction do we want to go, right? And we have, for a while, we're doing these regular Sunday evening conference calls. I think for the next few weeks, we've done, I think we're going to go to like an every other week schedule. But then as we get closer to a special session, that'll ramp up again. And then we also, right now, we're working on appointments. There's a lot of off-season work that goes on commissions and boards. And just so you guys have subcommittees of the school board that do a lot of the work between meetings. So I was just recently appointed to the Code Commission, the Housing Commission. So I'll be seeing Ibraheem a lot because we sent some of his bills to the Housing Commission. So we'll be working on those together in the off season. The FOIA Council, where we're going to work on transparency issues, because that's been an issue, as you guys have probably heard, with our elder care facilities and things like that. A lot of dissatisfaction with the way that some of our FOIA is being used. So I look forward to bringing some more transparency to that process. And then the Board of Veteran Services. So I've got 4 new commissions in addition to the 4 or 5 committees. But that's another piece of what's us having taken over now. It takes a while for all that to percolate down. And so the speaker now has the opportunity to fill all of these slots on a lot of these commissions. I think she's going basically, frankly, in the order in which they next meet. Right? So which one has the next meeting? That's the one we got to fill first, because there are literally hundreds of these and hundreds of slots to be filled. So that's a part of the process that's going to help us figure out what we want to do going forward also.
Have you seen an uptick at all in your constituent contact?
Yes and no. I mean, volume wise, maybe not as much in that, like, for instance, if we have gun bills, right, I may get 300 emails saying vote for this or don't vote for that or whatever, but I'm getting a big uptick in very specific, very need-based constituent requests. Like, I can't get onto the Unemployment Commission website, or when I get on, it won't take my information correctly. Can you help me get, to the right person? The DMV, I know that it's generally closed, but I need something to do this. So we've had a lot of folks that have needed help navigating the system. And Andrea Tatro, my legislative aide, chief of staff, I don't want to sell it so short, has been very, very busy. And she and I have been working on a lot of those types of constituent requests, because there's a lot more need than there has ever been in the past. And particularly up in Northern Virginia, I have we have pockets of poverty in my district, but I have a generally fairly well-off constituency. And we have folks that are have never had to navigate those kinds of services before. They find themselves in a really unfamiliar position. And so being able to help them, guide them to where they need to go has been a big part of what my staff has been doing for the last several weeks, unfortunately.
A lot of to echo what Delegate Simon was just saying, a lot of high need for work emails being received, and a lot of high need messages and calls. They used to be, more along the lines of just stating their politics and saying, I oppose this or I support that. But now it's, I need to figure out my whole employment situation, my unemployment situation, my healthcare. How do I apply for this? How do I can't apply because I'm an independent contractor. That was a big one before they clarified for independent contractors, how they can get their $600 a week from the federal government. Gosh, I mean, so much of that. And so, it's been very busy times for my staff and myself included as well. So maybe you can help us, guys.
Similarly. Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe you guys can help us.
What? Oh my gosh, with the services?
Yeah.
We can try. Certainly education, I'm more than happy. And that's part of, I like doing these to connect different public officials and different folks who are out there in the front lines somehow. Not the foot soldiers. Those folks are exceptional. And I don't want to compare ourselves, but yeah, I mean, to let them know, this is a time when people are interfacing with their public officials more than they maybe ever have. And so, or more directly, recognizing what services are even out there. I mean, we did a session with the Department of Family Services. We had a ton of, audience members didn't even realize certain things were out there for them. So, it's an opportunity for us really to step up ourselves and then to be able to serve. And that's kind of the call that we, sought to answer. So, Kimberly, I know, has one other budget question. I also want to be mindful of y'all's time and respectful. I know you guys might have to hop off. I think we have one on, go ahead, Kimberly, ask the question and we can wrap up.
So it looks like Yasmin Shafiq, she asked, do we know the extent of the economic impact of COVID on the budget so far? I think you guys touched on that a little bit beforehand, but yeah, just for the sake of answering Yasmin's question.
Marcus, if I could take it. I think it's $1 billion that was estimated so far on the single year budget out of 60 billion. That is around 60 billion, if I'm not mistaken, excuse me.
What number did you say? I'm sorry, I missed it.
What, 1 billion out of the 60 billion per year?
I think so. In the current fiscal year is $1 billion. I think that over the biennium, we're looking at maybe more in the magnitude of 3 as far as general fund dollars. But that's so far. I mean, the short answer is we really don't know yet, and that's what we're going to try and figure out. I mean, we went from having a record sort of a surplus situation where we were socking money away, and Ibraheem and I were bugging them to spend more of it now. Why do we need to put it all in this reserve funds? And wow, we just spent down our reserve fund, and we're going to have to go cut, not just but down to the bone on some things. So yeah,
it's exactly the same locally. I mean, well, smaller, but we're within what 75 million range of what we had cut, and it let us, we were so excited. I think many people, actually, even you guys and local folks who ran, were saying we're going to raise teacher salaries, we're going to fund education, and we were all excited about our proposed budgets at the time. But here we are, and we're not able. We have to freeze the step increases and the cost of living adjustments that were planned. But hopefully, I mean, we're still, we still want to do it. It's just a matter of really seeing the financial situation and being a little conservative, not knowing what is coming in the future.
Well, you guys have the same limitation that we do, and that the federal government doesn't. It is frustrating for a lot of our constituents is that we can't really borrow, and we can't print money. So it's got to come from somewhere. And one of the things that everybody can be doing, hopefully, and people on this call, is lobbying, and not it's your senators. It's not really our senators, frankly, even, but more federal funding to states and localities, because only the federal government really has the capacity to generate the revenue that we need and to generate the funds that we need and borrow the kind of money that we need. in the orders of magnitude that we're going to need it. Because otherwise this all falls on localities and states, and we end up paying it back with state and local taxes. I mean, the feds will say, oh, we haven't raised your taxes. They starve the localities that have no choice but to provide the services some way or another. It results in higher property taxes, results in higher gas taxes and other state level taxes. So we really need more federal aid to localities and state governments, because I think that's where a lot of the people are in need at a local level.
Right. No, exactly. And the localities know how best to serve what, the community needs. They're closest to it. And unfortunately, school boards don't have taxing authority in Virginia.
At all, right?
Yeah. So we're beholden to the Board of Supervisors, who, also is in a tough spot and decided this year that they're not going to be increasing taxes, although they were planning on a small penny increase to the budget to be able to make up for some of the exciting things that we were hoping for. But here we are. We're going to get through it together, and we're going to continue monitoring the situation to see how we can make the most of it as it changes and evolves. So, but yeah, with that, thank you guys for your time. Maybe a final sentence, a message of hope to the community as you close out and leave us here. What's your feeling looking ahead?
Well, let's say that we are very hopeful, as long as we in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia are doing our best individually, staying at home when we don't need to be out and about, putting on all the protection that we need so that we don't are not infected by COVID-19, but also we don't spread it as well. We'll be getting out of this all sorts of fiscal problems, public health problems in no time. But if we don't do that, and if we keep getting bored and sick and tired of staying at home and wanting to leave and go out and about, then we're going to keep having this problem evolve and grow. And we can't talk about any of our issues, any of the politics that we want to advance without being safe and keeping our neighbors safe, keeping our families safe. So, to a more safe public health environment first and foremost, and then we could talk about healthcare and housing.
Cool. Marcus.
Yeah. So if you want to try and get some lemonade out of these lemons, right, that we've been dealt,
or the limes.
Yeah, or the limes. I think Ibraheem's right, and about getting back to this conversation about housing and needs like that. I think a couple of things are already happening. One is we're being forced to innovate through the stay-at-home order. I think that a lot of those innovations that you're starting to see, people are starting to get serious about distance learning. You're seeing that at the school board level and working out the quirks. But we're learning new ways of doing business. In my business, we're doing remote online notarization, and we've really been forced to sort of shore up the standards for that because people needed to do it out of necessity, right? And so I think it's changing business practices for the better. I also think that it's changing people's attitudes about not just technology, but also the role of government. I think for a lot of people that thought for a long time, what do I need the government for? Who cares? Let's let it wither and vine, the old Grover Norquist line. Let's shrink it to the point where we can. No, you want a government that works when you need it, right? When there's a pandemic, we crave competence. And so I think that at the end of this, or whenever we get towards the new normal, I think the new normal is going to be a greater appreciation for the role of government. I think there's frankly also going to be more empathy, I hope, for people that are suffering a hardship. I think there's been an attitude in this country, certainly among Republicans, that poverty is the fault of the poor, right? That people that are struggling is due to something that they've done wrong. And I think people are beginning to get a better appreciation of the fact that bad things can happen to people and can really throw things off. And you want the government to be there. So I think when we talk about healthcare for all and universal healthcare, I think that's going to be a much different conversation 6 months from now than it was 6 months ago. When we talk about the social safety net, people are going to realize that's not a social safety net for somebody else. That safety net could be for me too, right? And so, what I'm hopeful about, if you're going to be optimistic about something, is that when we get through all this, it's going having just like depression era, people that lived through the depression, it changed the way they looked at things forever. I think that those of us that make it through this are going to look at the role of government differently. And I think that folks that share priorities like ours on this call and in this group, I think we'll have more company, more people will be like-minded. So hopefully we'll be able to make further progress on these issues once we start thinking about them again. So that's my lemonade. Let's see if it comes true. How much sugar?
No, that's some good lemonade. Yeah, no, add some sugar and I really, I agree with you. And I think it's plus minus, right? There's a lot of good that comes out of that. It's certainly an unfortunate statement or the human condition that it took something like this for us to realize, the fickleness really of our circumstances, and that anything can change, and to have a heart for humanity in this circumstance. So we will look ahead with hope and a positive outlook to the future. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Ibraheem, for joining us today. Thank you to our audience.
Sorry I was late.
Yeah. Thank you to our audience who tuned in. We will have our next session on Sunday at 7 p.m. It's a special senior session. We're going to have the presidents of every senior class council in Fairfax County attend and brainstorm their ideas as to how we can honor our seniors. And we're also going to have the deputy superintendent of FCPS, Francis Ivy, who has been working closely on this issue and who's come up with the graduation plans for this coming spring. So be sure to tune in, and we will see you on Sunday at 7 p.m.
Congrats, class of 2020.
Yeah, huge congrats to all of you.